one of the things that fiction can accomplish is to frame those questions that many of us think about, not necessarily to give answers, because the answers that an individual comes up with for herself or himself may be very different. But to pose those questions in a way that's dramatic and thought-provoking and leaves open an area for conversation.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's the author podcast where we get to meet amazing authors from around the world and hear their journey, and also introduce you to an author that's going to fill up your library with great stories and great books that you want to read and you want to share. And Ellen is here with us today. I'm excited to have Ellen on the show. We're going to talk about all things authorship and her amazing stories. Ellen, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad to have you on the show.
I'm delighted to be here, Dave. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Well, I'm up here in Canada where it's cold and I have my fireplace on, so trying to keep us both warm here. But where are you in this big world of ours, Ellen?
I'm in Western Massachusetts in the Northampton, where it is also very cold, but I don't have a fireplace in my room, so thank you for sharing yours.
Yeah, I'm sharing it virtually over Zoom, so hopefully the temperatures are fine for you on your end. That's good. I'm glad to have you on the show, Ellen. We have authors who listen to the show, and they come here for one real reason. They want to connect with people like you. As a listener, they're just starting their journey as an author, and any insight they can learn from a fellow author who's further down the path would be really helpful for them. So if you could kind of go back in your mind to when you first started writing, what would be some of the encouraging things that you would have liked to have heard from an author further down the path that maybe we can share with somebody listening today? What do you think could be helpful from your perspective?
Well, are so many different ways of writing a novel. I have friends who outline and know exactly where they're going. For me, that was not the right path. I needed to be surprised as a new writer. So I consider myself a member of the Kurt Vonnegut School of Writing a Novel. He once said, "The way to write a novel is to jump off a cliff and develop wings on the way down." And that's the way I think of the process for me, of being open to what might happen rather than having an idea ahead of time of what the character's journey will be during the book. Now, this may not work for everybody, but for me, allowing myself to be surprised and allowing myself to take the journey along with my characters is what keeps me writing and keeps me fascinated by the process.
Interesting. I can just visually picture a cliff and thousands of authors standing there with their toes right at the edge of the cliff. And here comes Ellen. And off she jumps. And they're all looking at you like, what are you doing? But that's what it takes, right? You just have to do the leap, right?
I think you do. And especially as a new writer, when you haven't possibly even shared your work with anybody, it's hard to keep the faith in yourself. But that ability to be surprised and to follow with your characters was helpful to me.
How soon into your writing journey, jumping off of that cliff, did you start telling friends and family that you were on this path of becoming an author? How soon did it take for you to start telling others?
Well, the people who were close to me knew right away because I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop being excited verbally with them about what it was. For me, the other thing that was very helpful was being in groups with other writers and sharing my work and getting their feedback, what scenes really worked for them, what didn't, where they got bogged down, so that I could have that pretend relationship with readers, even though nothing was out there in the world. My readers were other writers. But for me, that was really so important.
Yeah, having having those people in your world who understand what you're trying to accomplish, having some kind of guardrails to keep you on path as well, so you don't go wandering off into the distance. You need some kind of direction when you're first starting because you don't know what you're doing, right? So yeah, that's kind of the idea for this podcast. Is I want to bring a little bit of that knowledge into each episode to help all the authors who are listening. So I think that's powerful. Did you ever get stuck in your journey as an author first starting out, where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Need to go get help from somebody now that I have kind of written myself into a corner and I don't know where to go next?
All the time. I
Yeah.
think you get stuck all the time. You go on tangents. And maybe you then say, boy, that really didn't work. I need to try something else. What if she did this instead of that? For me, after I'd been writing seriously for about maybe 3 years, I decided to do an MFA program, a low residency MFA program. Um, and so then I got some real help from faculty members, from other students who were also serious about writing. Um, and I think that program helped me learn the craft, but even more importantly, it helped me really see myself as a writer. I became a writer in the course of the 2 years plus of the program.
Getting that kind of actual training too is great. I think that's another part because I think a lot of authors start off, they start with limited knowledge and they don't really try to put themselves in a place where they can learn more. Yes, they'll group up with other people and learn from each other, but you can only learn to the level of the group. You need to kind of go somewhere sometimes and get that extra learning and extra education. That's very wise. I like that a lot.
But
Yeah. Let's talk about your journey too then on your writing and kind of what did you decide to write? How did you pick that genre? Like let's talk a little bit about how you can because you could write about anything in this world. How did you land on what you've landed on as an author?
well, I've always loved to read fiction. I mean, that's what I've read since I was a little girl. Sometimes I would finish a book and I would say, oh, I wish I'd written that. It's so good. Sometimes I would finish a book and say, I could do that. But it really wasn't until I was in my mid 50s that I decided I was going, if I thought that someday I was going to do it, I'd better start. So it happened that my husband was going to be writing a book, and we arranged to take 2 months off our jobs and rent a house on an island in Penobscot Bay. I arranged this so that my husband could write his book. But I had one of those middle of the night moments, like a light bulb moment, and said, this is the perfect time for me to start writing. So I spent those 2 months on this island writing short stories. And that setting has been critically important to almost all of the work I've done, short stories and novels. Many of them have been set on this island. So the island was sort of an inspiration for my work. But I mean, not everything is set there, but certainly many of my books and stories have been set there. And I think that the setting was critically important for me. It took me out of my everyday life. I was a nurse practitioner, and it allowed me to enter a totally different world.
The draw of that island, had you known about that island in the past, way before this journey of starting to write then?
Yes, I had vacation there. We had
Okay.
vacation, a week at a time, renting a house and enjoying hiking and the quarries, and it's a gorgeous place. So I knew of it, and when I thought about the perfect place for both of us to write, it was a no-brainer. It was
Wow.
a place.
So out of that process of those 2 months then, were you and your husband both successful as far as getting some substantial writing done in that time frame then?
We were very prolific. We both
Yeah.
every morning until about 1 or 2. We only had one laptop, so we had to share. we had
Oh
to,
no.
but we both wrote, and then we'd pack a lunch and go for a hike. And as we walked, we would talk to each other about what we were writing and what we were trying to figure out. It was just an idyllic 2 months.
It's an inspiring place to write, I would believe, for sure. Wow. Okay, so talk more about then your books. Your mosaic novel. Let's talk about this. It's a novel and stories and collection of stories. Is one thing we talked about when we met originally to chat about this. Let's talk about kind of the things that you've written, and for the readers, they're looking for authors who have written books, but they're so excited when they find out there's even more than a single book from an author. So let's talk a little bit about your library and what you have for readers.
Okay, so my first novel, which is called House Arrest, is about a home care nurse who was assigned to do prenatal visits to a pregnant woman who lived in a cult and was under house arrest because of the death of two of her children at a cult um, ceremony the year before. The nurse is really uncomfortable with this, partly because of the cult and partly because of her own family situation. The nurse had lived on this island in Maine. Um, and when the young woman in the cult asks her to break the rules in order to let her practice her kind of oddball religion, that's what sort of sets up the decision, the drama at the center of the book, part of which is set on this island in Maine, and the rest of which is set in Western Massachusetts. Um, so the story is told from different points of view and really focuses on the necessity of sometimes breaking the rules to serve justice, to do what's right. Um, about 4 years later, my second novel on Hurricane Island was published. And this takes place as a major hurricane heads for New England. And a math professor named Gandalf, I know that's a little weird, but that was is picked up at an airport en route to an academic conference. She is hooded and cuffed and flown in a small plane to an island off the coast of Maine where she is interrogated. I have to say, writing a political thriller, which is what this book was really weird. I don't particularly read that genre, but jumped off the cliff. This is what happened. I just imagined this character and her situation. And this book takes place in the few days approaching an anniversary of 9/11. So it's a very politically fraught situation. The third novel, Kinship of Clover, came out 2 years after that in 2017. And the main character of this book was a little boy in that cult. Now he's a college student and he is hallucinating vines growing out of his body, burrowing into his body. He's a botany major and he's very concerned about disappearing plant species. Um, so this is a book that really focuses on climate issues and what's happening in our world. The fourth novel is a historical novel, which kind of blows my mind because it starts in 1968, but that's considered a historical novel. And two sisters, Rosa and Esther, are at an anti-war demonstration in downtown Detroit protesting the war in Vietnam. And in their attempt to help other protesters who are being beaten by mounted cops, they end up causing an injury to a police officer. And it's really the story of these two sisters and how they react to their situation. Again, sort of the intersection of sibling loyalty and love and clashing political decisions.
Mm,
Uh,
interesting.
the the fifth novel is called The Lost Women of Azalea Court, and it's the story of a an 88-year-old woman who goes missing in her community, um, which happens to be a community built on the grounds of a now defunct mental hospital. Um, I live in the on the grounds of that hospital. So when I moved there, it's like the ghosts of the people who had been incarcerated in this facility started talking to me. Um,
Wow.
the woman's husband was a psychiatrist who had run the hospital for 40 years previously. Um, and so this is a somewhat different um, take, but some of her neighbors are Gandalf, who was the woman who was taken to the island, and Jeremy, the boy who had the plants growing out of his hands, his twin brother. So, as you can see, I have sort of a community of characters and places that live in my head and come out in all different ways. So, the most recent novel, Sometimes an Island, brings together many of these themes of migration, of climate concern, of political upheaval and political activism. And it brings together the two important settings, this island in Maine and Western Massachusetts, where a number of the books are also set. Um, it follows a family who fled the pogroms in Russia a century plus ago and came to this island and settled there. And then their descendants, who over 100 years later have to flee the island because of rising sea levels. So the new book takes place during the dozen years leading up to and following a climate disaster that changes the world as we know it. And the surviving characters have to figure out how to rebuild, how to live in a world that we as humans have pretty much destroyed, but not entirely. So, challenge with
Well,
this is to kind of balance the realities of what we're doing to the earth with hope that humans can rebuild, that we can reconnect with each other, and that we can figure out how to move forward.
well, it sounds like, well, when you were describing your books, as I'm listening, I'm thinking this book and this book of yours, they don't seem to connect at all. And then the next book doesn't seem to connect with the first book. And I'm like, it seems like you're going in complete different directions. But then as you pull it, as we go talk through it, you start bringing it all back together with your characters. And the one thing I also would suggest, or my thinking is, the island is almost a character as well. Just like all your other characters in the story, your island is kind of a home base for, as you write as well, right?
You are absolutely right about that. The character of the island is really important in these books. It's just a place that is is magical and very dear. Yeah.
There's a lot of timely themes to your writing as well that you've been writing over the years in our current environment and what we're seeing in the news today. There's a lot of similarities to what you've been writing and what's a passion for you and what's happening in the world. So for somebody who's really wrestling with the news of the day and feelings of kind of what their reaction to what they're seeing happening unfolding in front of them, do you think these books would be a great companion for somebody to like that to kind of spark new thoughts and spark new ideas, or just simply be a companion in a time of upheaval and things in the news right now?
I would hope so. I
Yeah.
think that, for me, one of the things that fiction can accomplish is to frame those questions that many of us think about, not necessarily to give answers, because the answers that an individual comes up with for herself or himself may be very different. But to pose those questions in a way that's dramatic and thought provoking and leaves open an area for conversation.
And stories can be a non confrontational way to talk about some pretty serious topics. We talk about climate change, for example. There are people who don't believe there is such thing as climate change. And then there's people who live in reality, like you and I, that are like, well, it's true. It's happening. You can tell what's happening in the world, right? So, but whenever you bring up a topic that could be divisive against people and people pick a side, a story seems to kind of cut through all of that. It's not as, it's not as like it's in your face, right? Here's a pick one or this or that, right? It's a story kind of comes in, it creates a world, it shares a message, and people even if you don't totally agree with maybe what the message is, you're still getting the message. And that's what I love about stories. It's a great way to share and bring people together instead of pitting us against each other.
I agree with you. And I also think that most of my books are written with multiple narrators, and often they are narrators who disagree with each other. So, for instance, the book about interrogation on Hurricane Island, it's from the point of view of a number of people, including the woman who has been kidnapped by Homeland Security, and a couple of FBI agents, one of whom is really gung ho, and one of whom is having some questions about what they're doing. And I think if you have multiple narrators who disagree, you open up the story for the reader to participate, for the reader and the reader's own opinions to enter in to the story. Our world is not black and white. Our world is pretty complicated and nuanced, and there is not one simple solution.
Now, is that difficult for you to write from someone else's perspective on a certain topic that's very meaningful for you and you have very strong held beliefs? Is it hard to kind of put on the other hat and see it from a different point of view as an author? I think that would be a little bit of a challenge to capture the other side of a conversation when you really believe in what you believe in.
It is challenging, but that's the kind of challenge that is just so exciting as a writer. So this one character who is really a gung-ho interrogator to crawl into a brain and into a human being that who I didn't like very much. I build him a backstory that would help me understand why he was the way he was. Um, and I had to just try my best to stand in his shoes and do the things that his own background and his own psychological makeup required of him. But yes, it's very challenging to write a really unlikable or even evil character. But it's also a really interesting and exciting challenge.
Yeah, like usually when I have authors on, they're like, I love my characters, I love the people in my stories, and I don't hear very often somebody say, I really don't like this specific character in my story. I would never interact with this character in real life. If they were a real person standing next to me, there would be problems between us because we just see the world from totally different points of view, and we don't mix well, oil and water kind of thing, right? And I don't usually hear a lot of authors saying that they don't like some of their characters. So this is refreshing, Ellen. I like that you've written from this perspective.
Yeah. Well, one of the characters in the Lost Women of Azalea Court is the psychiatrist who ran this mental hospital, and he did some pretty bad stuff. But I also spend a lot of time on his childhood in Nazi Germany and the things that happened to him. They may not excuse his behavior, but at least I understand, and hopefully the reader understands his behavior and why he is driven to do things he does.
Who are you trying to reach, Ellen, with these different books? Do you have a certain reader that you have in mind every time you start a new project, or are you creating a new audience with each time you sit down to write?
Honestly, I don't think about audience that much.
Hmm.
Um, by now, since this is my sixth novel, I have an audience out there of people who have enjoyed previous books and who I believe will be interested in the new one. Um, but when I'm just totally inside the story and not thinking about who's going to buy the book or what a review's going to say. I'm just there. And this most recent book in particular is like a literary family reunion with all of these characters coming back. So I'm just having a great time hanging out with these characters.
When you were writing each of your different books, were there crossovers with characters kind of coming into each other's world, or are they all separate? Did you kind of plan all this to happen?
I didn't plan it because, as I said, I jumped off that cliff. They showed up, and I would say, "Oh, you're here. Welcome. Come in."
Wow.
With this most recent book, I did some planning because I needed to have a narrative through line through all of the stories. So when I gathered the stories that I wanted to include, and a couple of them had been published before, but most of them were written new for this book, I could see holes in that narrative arc. And so I wrote a couple of stories to fill those in. And in that case, I did what you suggested. And, I said, okay, I need to bring this character back because that's a real loose end. And a reader is going to say, well, whatever happened to her? And I
Right.
want to be able to bring together the various important characters, settings, and themes by the end of this novel.
Right, because your characters are in different places at different times. So they some of your characters might be younger or older, and they might not be interacting in the story they were written into originally. So you're going to have to do some interesting crafting of your narratives to get everybody together in one place. Wow.
That's absolutely true.
Oh, that's interesting. Is it fun writing that story, knowing that you're pulling all these different pieces together for your audience?
It's great. It
Yeah.
is a family reunion.
Yeah.
It's and how have you been the last 10 years? To tell us.
Wow. That sounds like a very interesting idea. And I think very hard to craft that from the beginning when you jumped off the ledge of the cliff for that first time to know that you'd be doing something like this type of project to bring everybody back together again. It's full circle. I love this.
Yeah. Of course, I had no idea at that point. I didn't even know if I could write one novel, much less several, you know.
It's
Yeah.
exciting. Would you say for readers then a starting point would be to go back and start at the beginning as a reader? Would that be helpful to make kind of to follow the journey of your characters over time towards your newest writing?
It's possible to do that, but each book does stand alone.
Okay.
In each book, the characters are fully where they are in that story. And if a reader remembers, that this college student was a kid in the first book, that's fine, but enough background is given in each book for the reader to pick up with that particular story.
Ellen, your audience, your readers are here with us today listening to this. And maybe this is one of the very few times they've heard you talk about your books before. They've read your books, they have them on the shelf behind them, but now they're actually hearing you talk for the first time like this. Is there a message you have for your community, the readers who have purchased your books and supported you, left you reviews, all of that stuff? Do you have a message for your community that's gathered to listen to us today?
Thank you.
There
No,
you go.
I mean, as a writer, there is just nothing better than having people read your work, put a review on Goodreads or Amazon, or send a quick email. Um, I occasionally meet people, strangers, who, when we introduce ourselves, say, "Oh, I read one of your books." And really, there's little that's better than that. I'm very, very grateful for the community of readers and for the community of writers, because we all help each other. We help support each other. We talk about each other's books. We promote each other's books. We do events together. Um, it's a world I very much love living in.
When was the last time you thought of or went back to that original writing place you were with your husband back on the island? Have you been back since you've been so prolific in your writing?
I have not been back, although I'm hoping to go there this summer and do a reading in the library on the island.
Mhm.
I would love to do that, and I'm hoping that that can work out.
Right back to your roots.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, that would be interesting. That would be very interesting. Wow. Excellent. Ellen, for the people again listening, maybe the first time hearing of you and your amazing work, where would you like to send a listener so they can stay in touch with you and stay in contact? I do have a kind of a question to wrap up our conversation today, but before that, where do you want to send people so they can stay in touch with you and follow your journey?
I have a website, just my name, Meeropol.com, and I can be contacted through that. The books are all available, on bookshop.org or wherever. I prefer independent bookstores, but any place that sells books, it can be ordered. Um, and I enjoy emailing with readers. So if you get in touch with me about a book, I will answer.
There you go. Beautiful. I love it. So, Ellen, the name of the show is Living the Next Chapter, and it's kind of a leading question built right into the title of the podcast. But for you as an author and as a writer, how are you living your next chapter? What can we expect from you coming down the road?
Hmm. I don't really have a good answer for that, Dave. I am not sure I will write another novel. I turn 80 this spring, and I have been working on some short pieces, some essays. Um, I did get an idea, though, the other day for another book, and I'm trying not to think about it because I'm not sure if I have it in me or not, but no, I'll keep writing one way or another because it's just one of the things I most enjoy doing, along with reading. So I can't really answer what's next.
There you go. Well, it's just as long as it sparks some thoughts and keep doing what you do. And thank you for taking the leap off the cliff as a writer and taking us with you over the cliff. You brought us all along. So we're all with you. So wherever you go, we're going to follow. So that's great.
Flapping those wings, those arms.
That's great. Ellen, thank you so much for doing this. If new projects find you in the future, I'd love to have you back. Just keep me in mind. But thank you for sharing. You have a lot of great stories for us to fall in love with. And I'm encouraging everyone listening, when you, not if, but when you buy Ellen's books, you leave that great review and you tell somebody as well. Buy an extra copy and send it to somebody you love as well, because you know them and you know they're going to love the book too. So buy 2 copies and just keep spreading the word about Ellen and these amazing stories. And what a great way to cap off a bunch of seemingly disconnected stories by having a family reunion of your characters. Such a brilliant idea, Ellen. I'm so excited that you're doing this. It's great.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Excellent. Yes, everybody, all information as always in the show notes. Make sure you go and give Ellen all your love. Ellen, thank you so much for being on the show.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. I head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.